Stay hydrated, people. The world is like an oven these days, so make sure you drink enough. Hello there, I'm Simon. Welcome to my channel. And welcome to another episode of Pride's Past, the series where we dive into the past of GRSM LGBTQ+ Pride, obviously. And today I would like to talk about Florence Nightingale, which is not, as the name suggests, an Italian songbird. Instead, she's the mother of modern nursing. Of course, the history of nursing goes back at least to the Temple of Asclepios in Epidaurus, and then over the medieval hospitals before we get to Florence Nightingale. But that's a topic for another video. So Florence Nightingale was the one who made nursing a proper profession by founding a nursing school and advocating for social reforms like, actual healthcare. But before she did any of that, she was born on May 12, 1820, which is also the year George IV finally became king, by the way. Not that that's in any way relevant. She was born at the Villa Colombaia in Florence, Italy, which is where she got her name. She also had an older sister called Parthenope, because that's where she was born. I guess naming your kids after the place they're born is not a new thing. Her parents were fairly rich, but they weren't nobility. Her dad basically got rich by just inheriting a lot of money, the same way he inherited the name Nightingale. Like, he was originally called William Shore, but then he inherited the estate and the name from his mom's uncle. So now he's called Nightingale. Anyway, they were interested in social issues, and they were pretty progressive about it. So when they had kids, they got a darn good education, despite being girls. So when Florence was about 18, the family started traveling around Europe, and among other places, they stayed in Paris for a bit. While there, they met the hostess of a salon called Mary Clark, who became a very close friend of Florence's. Now, Florence was apparently pretty charming, which is why she had people asking for her hand. Or maybe the real reason was because her dad was rich. For a while, Florence was being courted by a guy called Richard Milnes, a philosopher from a rich family. And he did in fact ask her to marry him, but she refused. She wrote in her diary that she could be satisfied by an active and intellectual lifestyle, which he couldn't offer her. So she went on traveling through Europe, making connections with people who would be important political and intellectual figureheads in the future, like Sidney Herbert, secretary at war during the Crimean War. Now, throughout her life, Florence had a couple of experiences that she considered to be God calling her to devote her life to serve others. And that's kind of what set her on the path that she'd be following for the rest of her life. Because in 1850, which is the 13th year of the reign of Queen Victoria, she came across a Lutheran community in Germany called Kaiserswerth am Rhein, where she saw the local clergy doing what many might consider their Christian duty, which is helping the sick and the poor. So she'd found her path, her calling, and then she stayed in Germany for a couple of months for medical training. She learned the basics of being a nurse. When she returned to London in 1853, she went to work at the Institute for the Care of Sick Gentlewomen. And then the Crimean War began. I'm not gonna go too deep into it, but essentially, this was one of the first world wars. Forget about the one from 1914. This is the first one. Okay, maybe don't forget about that one either. That was pretty bleeping important. The point is that due to political disagreement and international alliances, a war happens around the Black Sea between basically the Ottomans and Russia. And because everyone's allies with everyone got involved. The fighting was focused on the Crimean Peninsula, hence the name of the war. Now, that fighting was pretty horrific, and people were getting hurt. Surprisingly, war will do that. So in 1854, Sidney Herbert, remember him, sent Florence and a bunch of nuns and nurses she trained to Crimea to help those poor souls. She made quick work of turning the hasty field hospitals into some proper hygienic nursing stations, and apparently she reduced the mortality rate to like 2%. After the war she went back to New York. That's not right. No, she went back to London and used the money from the so-called Nightingale Fund, which was itself funded by donations, and she used it to establish the Nightingale Training School, which is now called the Florence Nightingale School of Nursing and Midwifery, which is part of King's College London. And from there on, she kinda kept working to improve nursing and hospitaling by writing books about it, fundraising for actual improvements, and of course teaching nurses. And then the whole nursing thing kept growing more and more, and Florence got a couple of medals for her work. It's a little too much, and it's not relevant enough in this context to be interesting here. She died on August 13th, 1910, which is coincidentally also the year Mary Poppins takes place, which again is not relevant in any way at all. And that's pretty much the life of Florence Nightingale. But why am I talking about her in a Pride's Past episode? Well, as you may have guessed from the thumbnail, or from some of the stuff I just said, Florence Nightingale is thought to have been asexual. But what does that even mean? Long story short, asexuality is a kind of sexual orientation, not unlike homosexuality, pansexuality, bisexuality, polysexuality, etc. Except it's not actually a sexual orientation. Kinda like atheism isn't actually a religion. I know that's confusing, but I promise you it makes sense. Basically, asexuality is the lack of a sexual orientation, the lack of sexual attraction. Kind of. I mean, it is, but it's not as binary as attraction or no attraction. It's more of a spectrum, ranging all the way from sex repulsed to sex positive, and anything and everything in between. And any spot on that spectrum can have a different name, which certainly doesn't make things any easier. Not to mention that none of this has anything to do with romantic attraction or with the actual sexual activity. All of those are completely different. It also makes it very difficult to prove that someone is asexual, because the only one who can actually know who they're attracted to is the person themselves. Now, this may surprise you, but I am not in fact Florence Nightingale, and I haven't been able to talk to her to ask her. So this is gonna be real difficult. Now, as I said, Florence did have suitors, like the Milnes guy, but she refused his proposal because she felt like she could not be satisfied by a marriage with him. Instead, she devoted her life to her nursing career, because that's what God called her to do. Which kind of provides a bit of a Schrodinger's cat situation. I mean, was she asexual because she wanted to focus on her work? Or was she able to focus on her work because she was asexual? As I said, hard to know. She did, however, develop close friendships with a couple of people, like Sister Mary Moore and Mary Clark, who ran the salon in Paris. But it's pretty much impossible to know whether that was platonic, romantic, or even sexual. So if I take a step back from trying to filter through the evidence to see what sticks, and instead look at the big picture that was Florence Nightingale's life, the impression I get is that she was probably a lesbian asexual, which sounds contradictory, but it's not. Those two are not in fact mutually exclusive, I promise. I guess if there is a point to this video, it is that if you ask me whether or not Florence Nightingale was asexual, I say that that is very likely, but there is no way to know or prove it from what I've seen. I think it's safe to say that she was at least on the queer spectrum, but she was probably ace. And that concludes this episode of Pride's Past. I hope you like it, and if you want to help out the channel, you can find everything you can do right here. If you don't know what to comment, let us know what you think. Was she ace or lesbian? Or both? And of course, if you have corrections to share, or something I missed, please let us know down below. Same thing with your suggestions for people from the past of Pride. If you know someone interesting, let me know down below. And make sure to join us again next week, when I'll be talking about D&D again. And now, it's time to say goodbye. And thanks for watching.